You're listening to Cult Life with your host, Robin Jackson.
For some, religion serves as a community, a place of support. It can serve as a common identity shared among family members or a set of beliefs one has held since childhood that governs their lives. For others, religion is a source of pain and shame, a place they feel shunned and unwelcome or even unsafe. If a former believer said Christianity made her depressed, obsessive, or post-traumatic, she is likely to be dismissed as an exaggerator. She might describe panic attacks about the rapture, moods that swung from ecstasy about God's overwhelming love to suicidal self-loathing about repeated sins, or an obsession with sexual purity. A symptom like one of these clearly has a religious component, yet many people instinctively blame the victim. They will say that the wounded former believer was prone to anxiety or depression or obsession in the first place, that his Christianity somehow got corrupted by his predisposition to psychological problems. Or they will say that he wasn't a real Christian in the first place. If only he had prayed in faith believing or loved God with all his heart, soul, and mind, if only he had really been saved, then he would have experienced the peace that passes all understanding. But the reality is far more complex. It is true that symptoms like depression or panic attacks most often strike those of us who are vulnerable, perhaps because of genetics or perhaps because situational stresses have worn us down. But certain aspects of Christian beliefs and Christian living also can create those stresses, even setting up multi-generational patterns of abuse, trauma, and selfishness. Also, over time, some religious beliefs can create habitual thought patterns that actually alter brain function, making it difficult for people to heal or grow. When it comes to psychological damage, certain religious beliefs and practices are reliably more toxic than others. Janet Heimlich, who is an investigative journalist who has explored religious child maltreatment, which describes abuse and neglect in the service of religious belief. In her book, Breaking Their Will, Shedding Light on Religious Child Maltreatment, she identifies 3 characteristics of religious groups that are particularly prone to harming children. Clinical work with reclaimers, that is, people who are reclaiming their lives and in recovery from toxic religion, suggests that these same qualities put adults at risk, along with a particular set of manipulations found in fundamentalist Christian churches and biblical literalism. Here are the 3. Number 1, it's authoritarianism, which creates a rigid power hierarchy and demands unquestioning obedience. In major theistic religions, this hierarchy has a god or gods at the top, represented by powerful church leaders who have power over male believers, who in turn have power over females and children. Number 2 is the isolation or separatism, which is promoted as a means of maintaining spiritual purity. Evangelical Christians warn against being so-called unequally yoked with non-believers in marriages and even friendships. New converts often are encouraged to pull away from extended family members and old friends, except when there may be opportunities to convert them. And this brings to mind the Jehovah's Witnesses, which I was a member of. Some churches encourage older members to take in young single adults and house them within a godly context until they find spiritually compatible partners, a process known by cult analysts as shepherding. And number 3, fear of sin, hell, or a looming end times apocalypse, or amoral heathens binds people to the group, which then provides the only safe escape from the horrifying dangers on the outside. In 1993, psychologist Dr. Marlene Winnell published Leaving the Fold, which was a self-help book for former Christian fundamentalists deciding to forsake or leave their religion. Winnell, who refers to herself as a recovering fundamentalist, coined the term religious trauma syndrome more than a decade ago. It's the condition experienced by people who are struggling with leaving an authoritarian, dogmatic religion and coping with the damage of indoctrination. She's also was also the daughter of a Pentecostal missionary or missionaries. This combination has given her work an unusual focus. For the past 20 odd years, she has counseled men and women in recovery from various forms of fundamentalist religion, including the Assemblies of God denomination in which she was raised. Over the years, Winnell has provided assistance to clients whose religious experiences were very damaging. Some of them are people whose psychological symptoms weren't just exacerbated by their religion, but actually caused by it. So religious trauma syndrome is a set of symptoms and characteristics that tend to go together and which are related to harmful experiences with religion. They are the result of two things: immersion in a controlling religion, and the secondary impact of leaving a religious group. The religious trauma syndrome label provides a name and description that affected people often recognize immediately. Many other people are surprised by the idea of religious trauma syndrome because in our culture it is generally assumed that religion is benign or good for you. Just like telling kids about Santa Claus and letting them work out their beliefs later. People see no harm in teaching religion to children. But in reality, religious teachings and practices sometimes cause serious mental health damage. The public is somewhat familiar with sexual and physical abuse in a religious context. But as journalist Janet Imlich has documented in Breaking Their Will, Bible-based religious groups that emphasize patriarchal authority in family structure and use harsh parenting methods can be destructive. But the problem isn't just physical and sexual abuse. Emotional and mental treatment in authoritarian religions can be damaging because of, number one, toxic teachings like eternal damnation or original sin. Number two, religious practices or mindsets such as punishment, black and white thinking, or sexual guilt. And number three, neglect that prevents a person from having the information or opportunities to develop normally. In addition to anxiety, religious trauma syndrome can include depression, cognitive difficulties, and problems with social functioning. In fundamentalist Christianity, the individual is considered depraved and in need of salvation. A core message is, you are bad and wrong and deserve to die. This gets taught to millions of children through many organizations. Religious trauma is difficult to see because it is camouflaged by the respectability of religion in culture. To date, parents are afforded the right to teach their own children whatever doctrines they like, no matter how heinous, degrading, or mentally unhealthy those might be. Even helping professionals largely perceive Christianity as benign. This will need to change for treatment methods to be developed and people to get help that allows them to truly reclaim their lives. I want to leave you with this from Elon University sophomore Haley Loftus, who researched religious trauma as part of her job as a social media coordinator for Spirit and Pride. She says, if you're gay and you're Catholic and you grew up with people saying all gay people go to hell and you've been told that since you're 5 years old, it starts with validating yourself as a human being. She goes on to say it's a lot easier said than done, That process really looks like validating yourself and understanding that you are worthy of having respect as a human being and all of your identity, and you shouldn't have to hide any of that. I strongly advise that you by leaving the fold by following the affiliate link in the show notes. And in addition, I recommend Breaking Their Will by Janet Heimlich in the affiliate link below. And if you are experiencing any of the symptoms discussed in this episode, please seek professional help. Until next time, bye for now.